Well, if you picked up a used industrial sewing machine, maybe a walking foot like this Consew 206 RB4 or similar machine, there'll likely be a few things that you need to fine tune before it'll really sew well, before you'll trust it with your upholstery or leather working projects, whatever it is you like to do. So let's run down the list of some common things to check. The fella I bought this machine from said that it would sew light materials like canvas up to maybe denim, but if you tried thicker materials, he said it wouldn't pick up the bobbin thread, were his words. And well, that's kind of like skip stitches, or it just quits sewing, there's no complete stitch. So I had a general look around the machine, and the first thing I noticed was the top half of the thread stand was actually missing. So with industrial machines, the thread needs to go up through the eyelet at the top of the thread stand, so the thread comes off like this. Well, if I were to just thread from the cone down to the machine, you're basically asking it to add this level of resistance of unspooling this 16-ounce cone. So that's got to be the easiest fix ever. We'll just replace that with a new stand that's complete. And this is what it should look like. So the thread goes through the eyelet, and it's always unspooling off the top. I also highly recommend these thread socks just to keep thread from tangling up on the stand itself. Okay, here's where I got a little bit concerned. I went through and oiled all the points on this machine, so everything's nicely lubricated with sewing machine oil. I turned on the old-fashioned clutch style motor. Make sure to lift up my presser foot here, and we'll just see how it sounds. Oh, that is a grating metallic noise. That's horrible. And this brings me to my first key point on troubleshooting your industrial sewing machine. If you hear a strange noise or the machine just isn't working right, always try to isolate the problem. And we do that just by tipping the head back and removing that drive belt. Okay, we'll fire it up again, and fingers crossed, just the motor alone. Oh, thank goodness. It's just the motor. We'll replace it with a servo. There doesn't seem to be any unusual resistance or noise when rolling the machine by hand. I'll test that a little further once the new motor is on. Okay, goodbye, good riddance. And I will give the former owner props for this somewhat clever fold-up table. I actually built something similar to this for my small Sailrite leatherwork machine, but overall, I'm not feeling it. I think I'm going to remove it. And that's what the new servo motor looks like. This is not a digital servo, but just a basic analog servo. Really simple to install, so I'll put a link to this one down in the description box if you want to check it out. And one thing that I almost always do on these is swap out the 75mm pulley for a smaller one. So there's the old pulley and the 45mm pulley that I'm replacing it with, just to slow the machine down a little bit and give it a little more control, as well as a bit more punching power. Just align your woodruff key and that pulley will go on just the same as the other one. And go easy when reinstalling that. Just enough torque to flatten out the lock washer, and that's about it. Okay, so that swap took about 10 minutes, and if you want to see the process in detail, I'll put a link to a video down in the description, but let's see what kind of control that'll give us. Oh yeah, that was well worth doing. Nice. And I know that'll make a big difference. And the more I look on this one, the more problems I start to see. The needle bar looks like it's rotated about 30 degrees from its normal position, so you have to loosen the needle bar clamping screw and carefully rotate that back into position and tighten up the clamp. This one's pretty far out of whack on the timing too, so I'm going to do a full timing reset, and if that's something you need to do, I'll put the link on how to do that for this sort of machine down in the description box. Just realize if you adjust your needle bar height, there's a specific position that needs to go back to. It needs to be 3/32 of an inch above bottom dead center. And my second key point, anytime you're working on an industrial sewing machine, make sure to change the needle. Put a fresh needle in, not one that's been kicking around the sewing drawer. Get a fresh one out of the container and make sure that it's the right needle system and size. Of course, for the 206 RB machines, it uses a very common needle system, the 135/17, or if it happens to be a leather point needle, it'll be called a 135/16. Make sure to always match the needle size with the thread weight that you're using, and my favorite combination on that is a 92 weight thread and a number 20 needle. Make sure to insert the needle fully up into the needle bar, and as you position that needle, the little notch or scarf needs to face the right. This one has a black or kind of sooty look underneath, and if it was just in the hook area, I might have guessed that it was just dust coming off the fabric, but this is the whole underside of this machine, and I realized what it was. Somebody was actually using a graphite-based dry lube. Which of course brings me to my third key point for industrial sewing machine maintenance. Only use oil specifically designed for sewing machines. It has a mineral oil base and it won't stain your fabric, and it just doesn't make that black nasty mess underneath like a graphite based dry lube. Never use that. Never use a 3-in-1 oil, only clear sewing machine oil. So I might have mentioned that the fellow that I picked this up from said that this machine did sew, at least to a certain extent, and then I noticed, look, you take apart this tension assembly and look at the order this stuff is assembled in. So the nut is on the outside, followed by the little washer and the spring. That's all correct. But then look, there's the tension disc, and in between the two tension discs is this base for the spring. It's completely in the wrong order. So we need to put that back together in the correct order. The tension discs need to go on with the thread in between, and everything needs to align with that pin so it doesn't spin. Next will go that spring base. Same story there, that needs to go over the pin, but it should look like that. So there's a little bit of space in between the tension discs for your thread. That looks good so far. And then the spring. And then the washer with a little bit of serration on there to keep the adjustment that you set, and finally that nut. Just lift up the spring a little bit to get it seated in that dish of the black washer, and that's better, much better. And then just a couple pointers on getting the thread controller and check spring sorted on your machine. Now realize this is the upper thread tension knob, and this is just the thread controller. So twisting this knob does not adjust your upper tension, that just kind of retains the check spring. First thing I like to do is loosen up this screw here. It's a small flat screw, and that lets you rotate the thread controller. And just start with that in the middle of the slot and lightly snug that up again. So we'll make that key point number 4. Use a light hand when you're tightening things back up, and have a great selection of screwdrivers. I have about 25 screwdrivers, all of them flat, and you just need some good variety to get a nice tight fit. And one of my favorites is actually this stubby screwdriver because it has flats on it, so you can get a wrench on it if you need to loosen a stubborn fastener. And then as far as your check spring tension, you'll loosen this screw, and there's another screw close to it which will let you adjust the check spring position. So with that post screw loosened, you can go ahead and loosen off the nut on the thread controller slightly, and then just put a screwdriver in this space here, and counterclockwise for more tension on your spring, clockwise for less tension, and generally you'd like to set that on the lighter side. I think about it in terms of like a little candy Pez dispenser. That's about all you need. It shouldn't be heavy, just light and consistent. Then you can snug that post screw back up. And I like the position of my check spring to be just about horizontal or slightly up from horizontal, so that position looks good to me. Again, if you need to make an adjustment, just loosen the other screw on this side and you can set that stop. Just a couple things related to the hand wheel and we'll call it a day here. So if you ever notice that it's hard to turn the hand wheel, just slightly depress the foot pedal and that'll release the cork brake on your motor and let things move freely. And also, if you've ever noticed this little dot on the hand wheel, simply align that with the dot on the head casting. That's the position where it'll be easiest to insert or remove your bobbin case. And just a couple other details to think about on this machine. If you can't get your tension assembly sorted, just replace the whole thing. That's what I had initially planned to do until I just realized that things were assembled out of order. And then if you find that your walking feet don't alternate like they're supposed to when you're sewing, or they don't lift the same amount on the inner and the outer presser foot, just look for my video on walking foot don't walk. Bad grammar, but good advice on how to quickly sort that issue. And then here's a pair of adjustments up on top of the machine to adjust how much downward pressure your presser feet exert on your material. Sometimes it's a little recessed screw like this model, or on the old 226s or some of the Jukies, it's actually a knurled knob that sits up above the machine. I think they just decided to recess them so that your thread can't get hung up on it. But anyway, if you find that little screw, it's a flat screwdriver, clockwise down will give you more downward pressure, or counterclockwise for the reverse, and that's the one that has a rather large effect on the foot pressure. Or this one to adjust the pressure on that inner foot, and this one is a much more subtle adjustment. So you should be able to dial that in for a nice smooth action without too much resistance. Then I'll just work on some cosmetic stuff like removing this T-molding. I want to actually leave that tang inside the groove because I plan to come back and route a centered groove, so I need that material to stay in there for support and strength. But once I have my new slot cut, I'll just be able to tap in the new molding. And it's amazing what just a little tidying up of the legs and table can do. Turns it into a really nice machine that you'll be proud to have around your workroom. I like the 3M90 for a good bite when you're putting the pad down, and I do prefer a rubber cover rather than the cork that you typically see. And that T-molding made a huge difference on this one. Looks like a new table again, so not too bad for 12 or 13 bucks worth of material with free shipping. And if you find that you need little odds and ends as you look over your machine, like this slide plate that I discovered was broken, Q-Tech Sewing is a good one to go with. They've always done right by me. Always hold those threads back for a couple stitches while you get going, and let's see how it does with that new servo. Yeah, that's so much easier to control. And just listen how quiet it is. I like that. And here's where swapping over to that smaller motor pulley really gives you the advantage. I just don't think I could go quite that slowly with a larger pulley. For testing, it's nice to just bury your needle and then come up a little bit from bottom dead center, and then see if your back tacking will match the same hole spacing that you had on the forward stroke, and looks good here. Test it with changing directions and different speeds, and if you can't get it to falter, call it a successful repair. Well, if you've watched some of my videos and you're already a subscriber, I'd like to sincerely thank you. And if not, consider subscribing to The Thoughtful Woodworker. I'd love to have you on board. If this topic was right up your alley, hit me with a quick thumbs up. If not, drop me a note in the comments what video you'd rather see. And to make things easier to find, I'll drop links to the products I use for this project, as well as video resources down in the description. Well, if you're willing to put in half a Saturday's work once your parts arrive, it's pretty easy to refurbish most of these industrial sewing machines, and it's just a wonderful payoff too, because not only does it look cleaner with new edge molding and some details on the table, but this is a nice running machine now and it won't let you down on your important projects. Hey, thanks for watching. See you on the next one.